I think this time we're going to start with a story. A family gathering together as they do for Thanksgiving. But this year, the mother is prepping the turkey with the daughter-in-law. So two of them working together, working on this turkey. The daughter-in-law is watching the mother, and the mother is taking off several inches from the turkey, cutting off some of the legs, trimming up the end a little bit, and stuffing it inside the turkey. That confused the daughter-in-law, so she asked the mother, "Why are you trimming off 4 inches from the turkey?" The mom looked at her all perplexed. She's like, "That's how you cook a turkey. That's how my mom cooked a turkey. That's how I've learned how to cook a turkey. That's how you prep a turkey." Daughter-in-law still kind of curious, why? Like, trust me, this is just how you cook a turkey. This method has been in my generation, or been in my family for generations. That's how I learned it from my mother. So the daughter-in-law, still not satisfied with the answer, she goes to Grandma. "Why do you cook a turkey that way?" So she looks at the daughter-in-law. "Well, that's how you cook a turkey. You trim off several inches, it goes in the turkey. That's how we've always done it. That's how I was taught." Not satisfied with the answer, daughter-in-law goes to the great-grandmother. "Why do you trim 3 or 4 inches off the turkey and then stuff it back in the turkey?" So the great-grandmother looks at her and says, "Well, dear, we were so poor when I was a kid that the turkey wouldn't fit on the pan. So we trimmed off some of the turkey, we just stuck in the turkey so we could still eat it." Interesting concept, isn't it? Why we do or say the things that we do, more often than not, it's because that's how we were taught. If you really look at some of the tradition, every family, I don't care who you are, you can hide if you want to, but we know the truth. Everybody has something weird. Everybody has a weird tradition because that's how we were taught. The same thing seeps into the church. How many weird things do we have in the churches just because they were taught? And how do you rectify that situation? What are some of the popular ones? Really big concept is, and we've probably been a part of it or heard people do it or heard notion of or whatever else. We've heard, people praying to bind Satan. How many times have we heard that one? That's not biblical. What does the Bible teach us? That Satan has access to the throne of God. We see it in Job. We see it in Revelation. Peter tells us that the devil prowls about like a lion seeking someone to devour, not bound. We see him very much moving about in the Gospels. We see in one place biblically in Revelation that an angel had to bind him. It's always interesting listening to those prayers of somebody binding Satan. What happens 24 hours later? "Man, Satan's just knocking at my door. He's just really after me right now." It's like, how can that be? He was bound 24 hours ago. Well, there aren't very good chains. They're just not made the way they were used to. Another popular one. So we have that one, and it seems almost harmless. Like, well, that's just kind of, it's not a big deal. But how much does that push us around in our faith? Another one. Those of you that remember last year as we're moving through the book of Revelation, Chapter 5, the Lamb, Jesus receives the scroll. We remember that. We have the scroll with the 7 seals on it. The Lamb is holding the scroll, and Jesus is breaking each seal. We remember that. The first seal sent out the first rider. The rider on a horse that looks a lot like Jesus' horse, wearing something that looks similar to what Jesus is wearing, except he's wearing a perishable crown, and he's carrying a bow. A great deal of churches teach, it's not quite as popular anymore, they would teach, well, that's Jesus. That doesn't really make any sense. Jesus is the one breaking the scroll, the seals, to send out judgment. He is not the first judgment. He is not the judgments. That conqueror, and there's quite a bit of popular teaching to go behind that one. I do myself hold that is the Antichrist, someone that's supposed to look a lot like Jesus. Or a spirit of the Antichrist is another popular one. Jesus' second advent is at the end of Revelation. So how do you break those? You have to take it back to the Word. And we're going to get a lot of that, especially in chapter 8. It's my general mission to finish a chapter a week. I don't think it's going to happen today. we've got quite a bit in front of us. Everybody had quite the confusion over what the king and the kingdom was supposed to look like and how it was supposed to operate. And it's very important. It seems trivial sometimes. Well, that's kind of what they believe about the kingdom. It's what they believe about Jesus, but they do believe in Jesus. You're going to notice, if you don't have a real solid kind of concept of, or at least a general one, of the character and the nature and the heart of God and of his Son, you'll see that it changes your walk very much. So we're going to pick up in chapter 8, verse 1. In those days, the multitude being very great, and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued me 3 days and have nothing to eat. Let's kind of break that one down a little bit. In those days, in what days? Where is Jesus? When Jacob was here teaching last week, we see Jesus being at the Decapolis. Decapolis meaning 10 cities. Deca 10, polis, cities. It's on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Largely a Gentile region. So we have a lot of this following, and there's probably a lot more Gentiles in this group than there were in the following and the feeding of the 5,000 that we were in a couple of weeks ago. So this is the region he's in, and we see that the name of Jesus is spreading through the area. That's pretty awesome. An area that most people would think that Jesus' name can't go to. Likely a part of that, you remember the demon-possessed man up near the Golan Heights after the demon that called himself Legion was cast out of the man and into the pigs. He wanted to go with Jesus and the disciples. Jesus says, no, you need to go back into your home and tell everybody what has happened. So we probably have a little bit of testimony from there. And he calls his disciples to him. It reemphasizes the point that he's the one that calls us to the work, but we're also going to see a teaching moment and a serving moment. He says, I have compassion on the multitudes. They've been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I love that. Compassion for people, especially compassion for people that don't really fit in with our people. Do we have that heart like Christ? You can't fake love. That's what I really enjoy about who we are. Our distinctives. A great deal of churches, well, in order for you to prove that you're a believer, what do you have to do? The big one is tongues. There's a problem with tongues. No one can really discern it. What I've noticed a lot about people that use the gift of tongues, what's supposed to go along with that biblically? Yeah, very good. Learned students everywhere. An interpreter. You get someone speaking in tongues, that is a spiritual gift, which means somebody else is gifted with interpretation. Most of the time I hear tongues, I always see generally one of our teachers or a mature believer looking around for someone with the gift of interpretation. Rarely do I see one. What's the problem with tongues without an interpreter? You can fake it. It's that easy. You can fake it. But you can't fake love. You cannot fake compassion, the marks of a believer. And if I send them away hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar, taking care of them in their travels. And I really like this aspect of the ministry of Jesus. One of the things that have come our way as ministry leaders here is the concept of Jesus. What was presented to us is that Jesus does not care about the physical. That his miracles are spiritual. That's what Jesus cares about. Jesus cares about your spiritual state. I'd have to say that is so far from the truth that it's not even funny. To think that Jesus doesn't care about your spiritual state, that would change your prayers. That would change on the physical state. That would change your prayers. That would change how you look at somebody else's physical state. We see Jesus here cares very much. They're going to faint on the way. He's taking care of them as they are going. So we also get to see and have that look into the provision of God and how good and how perfect it is. And he's very practical. You can kind of see what he's doing with the disciples. What should be going through your heads right now? Oh, this is that thing that he did a little while ago with the feeding of the 5,000. We're going to do it again. So Jesus is bringing in his disciples, again for this teaching/serving moment. I can't send these people away because if they leave, they're going to faint. Then his disciples answered him, how can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? Am I the only one that thinks that sounds kind of dumb? It's really easy to mock the disciples right here. It really is. This is a smaller crowd than Jesus had dealt with before. Here we're given a total number of 4,000 people. You remember at the feeding of the 5,000, there was 5,000 men besides the women and children. What does that mean? There's more than 5,000 people. Here it says there are 4,000. He's got less people. The disciples should have been really those cheerleaders at this point. They should already know, what did Jesus do before? Make them sit down in groups. We'll break them down in groups of 50s and 100s. We'll set them down in rows. Last time we didn't have a table. Peter, get the table. That way we can put the bread. Oh, we need extra baskets. We had so many baskets left over. It wasn't even funny. John, make sure all the baskets are set up. All right, guys, get ready. This is going to be awesome. What is their response? Something it's easy to mock. It's impressive how fast we forget. We forget what God has done or brings us into a place of fear or extra planning. And it happens with all of us. In all transparency, it's something that Megan and I are working through right now. The ministry is keeping us very busy. So is work an hour away. What's in front of us right now, for the second time, is for me to quit my job. Last time I quit my job to pursue ministry, God took care of it. Still ended up with another job. We always had food on the table. Still ended up in another house. I was working for $13 an hour while still trying to maintain a house in California while looking for a house for my family. God took care of it. When we moved to Baker, similar, but I still had my work. Now I'm worried. What's going to happen if I leave my job? The simple answer is the exact same thing happened last time. God's going to take care of it. But often our fear can override even our memory of what God has done. It's also easy to kind of trivialize this miracle or to make it seem like something of just an insignificant repetition. And we will see some differences here. But I marvel at the question. When I was studying this passage yesterday while we were getting ready to come back from Twin Falls, we'll read it again real slow. Then his disciple answered him, how can one satisfy these people or this multitude in the wilderness with bread? Can you imagine the look on Jesus' face? For us, what should we be able to do? Where is this in the Word? This is Exodus chapter 16. This is the manna that God provided in the wilderness to the multitude. Jesus, the originator of these creative miracles, one of those, it was huge. For the children of Israel, at that point in time in the Exodus, that was a huge thing. And they're asking him, well, how are we going to feed all these people with bread in the wilderness? The same way we did it before. I am going to do it. That's a great question. How can one satisfy with these people with bread here in the wilderness? You can't. The problem is we often like to think ourselves as the creator or the originator of the miracle. That is not the case. Jesus is the one responsible for the creative miracle. But you just imagine it's kind of the look on his face, especially since they had just done it. What impresses me more and turns my heart more is what's absent in the text. I can be, so I'm told, a sarcastic person sometimes. Whether it's true or not, it's yet to be proven. It's easy for me to mock the disciples. Are you kidding me? Jesus just did this on the west side of the Sea of Galilee with a much, probably, I'm going to go ahead and say just twice the size, by hijacking and blessing some kid's lunch. How are you so forgetful? Notice that Jesus doesn't do that. Oh, I love the compassion of Christ, not just for the multitude, but also for his people. I hold myself and my people to a higher standard. Something kind of goes awry or wrong or backwards or it's time for correction. Generally, I'm pretty forward, straight to the truth, allegedly sarcastic. Jesus doesn't do that. We get that fear. I have messed up. It's not something I take before the Lord. I did something wrong. I can get myself out of it. Because we don't have the right understanding of the Lord's heart towards us. But we see here in the passage, compassion. But instead asks a question, and here's where the differences start coming into play. Verse 5, he asked them, how many loaves do you have? And they said, 7. Where'd the first one come from? The only smart kid in the whole crowd. Or it was just a regular kid with a really smart mother. Could have gone either way. Probably the smart mother. There's all these people, protect this lunch with your life. And he was the only one that had food. It's easy to do ministry when you're using somebody else's stuff. Not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. There are people just, their gift, you let me know what this is going to be or cost or require, and you let me know, and that's just kind of how they give. That makes it really easy until it's your stuff, until it's coming out of your pocket. The disciples, as we know, they traveled fast, and they traveled light, and they traveled far. They didn't have a whole bunch. They had 7 loaves between the 12 plus of them. So one, they knew kind of right away what it is that they had. That's good. Good stewardship. That's what we should have. They have 7 loaves. They take those 7 loaves to Jesus. This time it's going to be their own stuff. And we see them bringing the 7 loaves. And it's important for context. They have 7 loaves. That is their response. Jesus says, how much stuff do you have? How much stuff is in your bank account? How much energy do you have left in your body? How much food do you have in your cupboards? So if I'd ask some of you right now, how much gas is in your gas tank? Most of you, I see some weird faces, horrible. Most of you know how much gas is in your gas tank. So I'm going to say half. This is what they say. We have 7 loaves. This is what they bring to the Lord. Jesus says, how much do you have? Their answer is 7. So we're going to hang on to that magical number. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. Again, showing kind of that order to this process. He took the 7 loaves and gave thanks. Oh, man, I love that. That's one of the things I really love in my household. Every meal, we sit down and we give thanks. What are we being thankful for? Same thing they're giving thanks for here. God's provision. He broke them, gave them to his disciples to set before them, and they set them before the multitude. Really shows the process. Jesus is responsible for the creative work, the creative miracle. The disciples responsible for the distribution of that miracle. It's really important we stick to that process. Once we start becoming originators or start trying to operate out of something that we saw in verse 1, not being called to him for the distribution of something, that's when we kind of start to run into some trouble. Back to the concept of Jesus not being worried about the little things. This is important. He doesn't need your help. I know that sounds harsh. He doesn't need your help. It's like, well, we need to herald the word or give warning. Jesus has used animals, nature. We see in the book of Revelation, we see angels. He wants you a part of that work. Again, to demonstrate his heart. So he sets it before the disciples, and the disciples are responsible for the distribution. Verse 7. They also had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. The disciples had 7 loaves. That's what they gave to Jesus. That was their answer. How much do you have? We have 7 loaves. Jesus takes the loaves, gives thanks, blesses, breaks. They're set before the multitude. Lord, we also have 2 fish. Why is that in there the way that it is? Either A, they didn't know they had 2 fish. Seems unlikely. Fishermen know exactly how many fish they have. Said fishermen send me hate mail while I'm trying to be at a conference of said fish. I full well planned on rebuking said individual from the pulpit, but we're going to refrain. I don't answer my phone when I'm at conferences or I'm in something heavy. Megan decided to hand me the phone. It's like, oh, a picture was sent to us from somebody in the church. It's like, I don't want to see it. And I was right. It's a great big 5-pound fish, and I was horribly upset. So it's unlikely they didn't know they had the 2 fish. Why bring the 2 fish up after? I think this is this is my opinion, given on what's in the text. They wanted to make sure that what they had, as small as it was, that it was safe with Jesus before they gave the rest. Probably something else that we are familiar with. Why give if it's going to be wasted? So it is very possible that they were kind of holding back a little bit just to make sure that what they were giving were safe with Jesus. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. Immediately got into the boat with his disciples and came to the region of Dalmanutha, or in Matthew 15, so that's a region of Dalmanutha. He kind of narrows it down in Matthew to Magdala, so he leaves the east side and goes to the west side. But back to verse 8 and verse 9, I really kind of want to point out the process. And I think it's a very good word for some of us that are kind of stuck in this place. We see this multitude continuing with Jesus in the wilderness. That's not where we want to continue with Jesus. We want to continue with Jesus someplace cool, someplace nice, someplace comfortable. I've been very blessed in my ministry. We haven't really been anywhere weird. We started in Gooding, great place, good fishing, good duck hunting. I was surrounded by family, so I had a good safety net. Served in Homedale, about the same thing. Once the doors were kind of closing in Homedale, it's like, man, I don't want, what's the Lord got for us now? And we were brought to Baker. I love it here. So we've been very blessed. But even in that walk, there's still a lot of the trials. There's still a lot of the hardships. There's still a lot of just those hard things. Or God is just calling us into that dry place. Why? Lord, if you really love me. And this is what, backing up towards the beginning of chapter 8, God's heart even towards the physical or towards the little things. Lord, why would you lead me out into a desolate place? That's a great question. If you are so loving and you are so caring about the things that are in my life, physical and spiritual and things going on in my family, why are you leading me out into a place to where I have nothing to do but depend on you? It's just that. So they're continuing with Jesus in the wilderness, and they are being fed. There's no place else to feed yourself in the wilderness but through Christ. And they went home filled. That's one of the biggest kind of just spiritual takeaways for me. It's a very bad day when I get home empty or I get home dry. There's a fantastic book out. It is a business book that they use for up-and-coming managers and business leadership. It's called What's in Your Bucket. Fantastic little book. It is a little book. I love little books. There's no pictures. I like that too. There's no pictures for the picture people. It's called What's in Your Bucket. If your bucket is empty, You want to fill your bucket. What's the fastest way to fill your bucket? Take it from somebody else's bucket. If you're taking it from somebody else's bucket, it's typically not done in the right way. But when we have full buckets, kind of like the word tells us, that spring is going to be flowing from our lives. It's just going to flow out into somebody else's bucket, somebody else's vessel. When I go home dry or I go home empty, we take it out on our family. We're critical of ourselves, and it always seems like it's that time. That's when somebody really needs something. And along with our bucket being empty, our stomachs being empty, our compassion meter is on empty. And we respond in the wrong way. A healthy body does see through to forgiveness. Obviously, unhealthy ones, and everybody has a bad day, does not quite see it that way. But when we go home empty, that's what happens. We're short and snappy with our wife. We're impatient with our kids, and we want to just go into something of a nothing space. How do we get filled when all the world around us keeps trying to steal stuff out of our bucket? Take it to Jesus for provision, not from something else. That's the best way to be filled. So they go home filled, and when you go home filled, you're going to pour into somebody else the right way. When your bucket is overflowing, you are going to pour into someone else. So they leave, they're filled, they travel to the west side towards Magdala in the northwest side. Verse 11, then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing him. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. There's a couple of ways to look at this verse. The first way, which is taught in some circles, not one I particularly agree with, but they approach Jesus and they recognize the idea that Jesus has done miracles. Things are happening. But they see those as trivial signs. What you've done is small-time miracles, which is cute because they can't replicate any of them. We want to see something big. We want to see something flashy. Something that other people have a hard time doing. More likely, and something that was commonly taught, there was something known as earth miracles and heavenly miracles. We're familiar with Jannes and Jambres from the book of Exodus. They were the Pharaoh's seers, the Pharaoh's sorcerers, or the magicians, whatever they want to call them. They were able to do some of the same stuff that Moses was doing. Not very well. Water would be turned to blood, and they could change it. Jannes and Jambres, not so much. They could replicate it. They could only make things worse. They couldn't make things better. They believed full well that demons or the devil, evil miracles could be produced. They wanted to see something from heaven. They can only be produced from heaven. Something like Elijah. Fire coming down from heaven, eating an army. You can kind of see the direction that that would go. If you really are who you say you are, show something only God can do. So they're doing it to test him, and they are disputing him. What's cute is they're asking for a sign from heaven, and it's standing right in front of them. I kind of love the practicality of that one, especially in that dry place. Lord, where are you? I desperately want to hear from you, and the things that God is doing, it's right in front of you. And God truly does make it that simple. In Matthew chapter 16, he goes into a little bit more information. Jesus says, this is chapter 16, verse 4. If you want to turn there, it's pretty short. I'm just going to read it to you real quick. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And he left them and departed. So we see that the only sign that Jesus is leaving is kind of the sign that matters. What is that sign? What is the sign of Jonah? Just as Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish, so shall the Son of Man. He's saying that is the sign that's going to be left. Why does Jesus say that? It's interesting in Matthew that he adds a wicked and adulterous generation, wicked and adulterous, wicked, a crooked line of thinking. Just bad teaching, holding on to things that they had been taught. How many things do we have in our family? How many generations can we trace it back? I know in my story, which I'm pretty sure is made up, it went back 3 generations. Some of us have some traditions that go back a number of generations. And how much do we fight for that tradition? Some of them are pretty serious. How many people fight over how to decorate a Christmas tree? I've seen some families get pretty divided over proper spacing. There's only certain kinds of ornaments that go on to the tree. Other ornaments that are ugly, where do those go? On the back and on the bottom. Closest to the tree, I can't really see them. Some traditions just get really gnarly. From big things to little things. Now imagine some of these things spanning back a little bit further. So they have a crooked line of thinking and adulterous. That's interesting. 1 foot in, 1 foot out, kind of dancing around back and forth. The miracles and the signs is never something to convert a person or to lead them into that born-again experience. Sensationalism. If you're brought in, term used loosely, brought into the faith with something just sensational, the big flashy show, and we've seen or heard stories or whatever else. We've seen videos of someone pretending to be drunk in the spirit. Not biblical. People dancing around with snakes. There's a whole horde of stuff. What's the problem with an experience? It fades. Along with your faith. And we talked about that in the parable of the sower. Once the whoever realizes that the experience is fading, what do you got to do? You got to top that experience. The stuff that Copperfield did 30 years ago is not impressive anymore. So you got to come up with something new, something bigger, something flashy, but rather, and this is really important, especially for those that feel that God does not really care about the physical. All of his miracles were to demonstrate the mercy of God, the compassion in the heart of God to people. All of these miracles, so many recorded. I think it was John that tells us that if we tried to put everything that Jesus did into a book, there's no amount of books that would ever hold it. Not one miracle was for Christ. Not one. But it was all to demonstrate. And miracles always kind of keep people focused on the material. Something else that will fade and not bring people to a saving and just that relationship with Christ. But rather it demonstrates mercy. He's saying no sign is going to be given. Verse 13, and he left them, and getting into the boat again, departed to the other side. So now he's moving from the west side back to the east side. Verse 14, now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than 1 loaf with them in the boat. Bummer. They had 7 before and 2 fish, so they were kind of sitting pretty, I guess. I don't know how big these loaves are. I don't know how big their fish are. If they're like every other fisherman, it was this big. 1 loaf. I've been a part of, entourage is not the right word, but when you travel somewhere as a group, as a church, as a business, whatever else, everybody's given tasks. You don't want to be the guy tasked with the sole thing and then forget that thing. Can you imagine? I don't know who it is in the boat. Can you imagine being the food guy? They had all these baskets left over, and you forgot them. Not only are you worried, well, that's just bad stewardship. I left a whole basket of bread. Now I have 1 loaf. But he forgot it for the group. The food guy forgot the food. So you can already imagine what happens when you forget something you know is important. What happens to your spirit? Man, your heart just turns and turns. I wonder how this is going to play out, but it ain't going to work out for me. So as they are mulling that over, verse 15, then he charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. Leaven, through the word, is always a type or a picture of either like a sin or an evil, something that kind of gets mixed in and it permeates. What's interesting is the use often of the term of leaven. We've all, maybe not all of us, anybody made friendship bread? Anybody familiar with that one? How do you start friendship bread? with a piece of the old one. So when trying to save leaven or yeast, they would save a clump of that dough and they would use it to try and make something new. So when Jesus is talking about beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod, as he's teaching his disciples, again, trying to correct that line of thinking, how important it is to do it God's way, fresh work in the Spirit, and not trying to take something old from the world to mix it in with it. But what does that mean? What is the leaven of the Pharisees? What is the leaven of Herod? Often, it's taught they're looking at the individual groups. They're breaking the groups apart. So what would be the leaven of the Pharisees? Traditionalism, ritualism, hypocrisy, bigotry, self-righteousness. That would be a leaven of the Pharisees. That's easy. We see that all through the text. What would be the leaven of Herod? Worldliness, immorality, skepticism. That makes sense. But it doesn't fit the flow. It doesn't fit the text. Why would Jesus mix them together? Into what line of thought is he seeking to correct? He's seeking to correct their view of the king and the kingdom. He's going to correct their concept of a king and a kingdom. They choose to wield their power and their authority in an oppressive manner. They set themselves apart from those that are, in their eyes, beneath them. Herod did it, and so did the Pharisees. They made sure that they stood apart from everybody else. They ended up becoming an obstacle between the people and God. They dressed better, wouldn't let anybody touch them. Whenever they gave, and we'll get into it more as we get to the Pharisees, they had a little horn. So as they're getting ready to put in their gifts into the box, they would kind of toot their little horn so that everybody would see as they would put it in. Anytime they would give out, they would make sure everybody saw how righteous they were in their giving. We're warned the same thing with their prayers and their fasting. What's it look like when somebody's fasting? The general concept of fasting is you're starving the flesh to feed the spirit. That's the concept. Starve the flesh, feed the spirit. So they're not going to eat. They're not going to drink. Or like Daniel fast. Not going to eat any pleasant food. What's a person look like? Weird, gaunt, tired. Someone's been trying to live off MREs for a month. They just don't look right. They would go the extra mile to make sure people would see just how much they're fasting, so they can see just how spiritual and just how holy they are. I'll tell you what, if you are a believer and you are fasting and you have chosen very deliberately through the Spirit and through the Word to fast, to starve the flesh, to feed the Spirit, that's the guy I want to be around, or gal, because they're doing everything they can to draw themselves closer to God. It's not the gaunt or the weird diet or whatever else around that's going to make them look all weak. It's like, oh, he's super spiritual. They're going to be overflowing. They're going to be the ones pouring into somebody else's bucket as they are choosing to pursue fiercely the things of God. But that's how they think a king and a kingdom should be. The king should wield authority over its people in a certain way. Jesus is going to teach them differently. How? You remember John the Baptist was locked up in prison by Herod, and he's waiting. Even John the Baptist kind of had a different idea of what the Messiah was going to be like. So he sends some of his people to find Jesus. Are you the one that we have been waiting for, or should we be waiting for another? It's a good question. How does Jesus respond? In Luke chapter 7, John calling two of his disciples, this is chapter 7, verse 19. That's not right. Chapter 7, verse 19. John calling two of his disciples said to him, sent them to Jesus saying, are you the coming one, or do we look for another? When the men had come to him, they said, John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, are you the coming one, or do we look for another? And that very hour he cured many infirmities, afflictions, evil spirits, and to many blind he gave sight. And Jesus answered and said to them, go and tell John the things you have seen and heard. that the blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have the gospel preached to them. How does Jesus correct a line of thinking? The same way that every teacher here is taught to do it. If you cannot say, this is that, if you cannot use the word to interpret the word, if you cannot use the word to back up whatever it is you're saying, guess what? You shouldn't be saying it. And you certainly shouldn't be teaching it. Why does Jesus say that specifically? Isaiah 35 verse 5. The eyes of the blind shall be opened, the ears of the deaf shall be unstopped, and the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the dumb will sing. Jesus gives something out of Scripture describing the Messiah. A crooked line of thinking was the Messiah was going to come and reign and trounce the Romans, throw them out. He's going to come in and be this great big military leader. They forgot that whole part where the Messiah needed to come as the lamb before he was coming as the lion that we see in the end of the book of Revelation. How do we correct a crooked line of thinking? You have to go back to the Word. You have to go back to that place of truth. It's important to be reading your Bibles and praying every day. So Jesus warns them. Take heed, so pay attention to, and beware of it. Just as important warning now. It is very easy for us as a body, as the church as a whole, to take something worldly and trying to mix it in. That was another kind of a big topic at the conference. COVID has crushed a lot of people. It has shut up the doors of a lot of churches. It has reduced the number of people attending churches. So what do? Do you rely on the provision of Christ while you're in the wilderness? Or you start mixing something else in? This is how big corporations would do it. This is how great big mega churches would do it. We need a fog machine. I need something else to suspend me from the ceiling so I can swing around the sanctuary so I can just make sure I see every people in the face. It's easy to switch to worldly tactics. It's easy to get a wrong concept of the character and the nature of God. Why? One, my guess would be we spend a lot more time watching TV than we do reading our Bibles. We spend a lot more time in traditionalism, in old teachings, instead of doing the homework ourselves. When someone tells me, well, God doesn't care what happens to my body, that floors me. I've never been taught that. That is not in the Word. So when you ask them, well, what in the world makes you say that? So either A, I have no evidence of God doing anything physical in my life. And you're spending a lot of time with your eyes shut. Or, well, this is what I was taught by Reverend so-and-so. Did you ever bother looking at the passage? One of my favorite ones that broke my heart. I work with a guy that he attended a Calvary church, work with a guy that attended a Catholic church. He didn't necessarily believe so much in Catholicism, but that's what his parents did, what his grandparents did, and his great-great-grandparents did. They went to Catholic church, just what they were in. His son, a young son, has a gluten allergy. The crackers that we give out, I don't know about ours, but their crackers weren't gluten-free. So a kid that's allergic to gluten eats a gluten cracker, whether it's been blessed by the priest or not, weird things are going to happen. So they went to the priest. Can you guys use a different cracker? That's a pretty bold request. But he also said, we're willing to buy our own little crackers. Could you bless them so that my son can take communion with a cracker that's not going to put him in the hospital? You know what the priest told him? If he doesn't eat the cracker that we bless and that we pass here, he is on that road to perdition. He is hellbound. Guess what church they go to now? The same one. He pulled me aside and asked me about it. Why would he say that? That's one of the most unscriptural things I've ever heard. It doesn't matter what cracker you're eating. That's not going to be dependent on where you're spending eternity. That's stupid. He's like, yeah, that's what I thought. They still go. People are taught so many things. The perpetual virginity of Mary. We just read in chapter 6 of the book of Mark. It gave the names of his brothers and said that he had sisters. But when people are taught things, like, oh, well, he's a pastor. He's a priest or a reverend or a shaman, whatever word they're going to go with. He's educated. True. Most of us are. I would say it just as fast as any of them probably should. You should not be taking my word for it. I still say dumb things sometimes. I still do dumb things. I've hurt feelings. I've twisted up people's hearts, not on purpose, or at least that's hopefully not my intent. They say, well, this is what Pastor Wage said, so it is gold. It's gospel. That's dumb too. Acts 17:11, go home and do your home. Read your Bibles. He said something weird. Why can't I pray and bind Satan? Read your Bible. And you'll figure it out. Does Jesus care about my physical well-being? Read your Bible and find out. You have to be in the Word. Otherwise, you will maintain a crooked line of thought. So Jesus warns them, do not let this seep in. Verse 16, and they reasoned amongst themselves, saying, it's because we don't have any bread. How easy it is to get distracted by the physical. They have taken what the warning, a very important warning that Jesus has given. Beware the leaven. Leaven's in bread. Beware the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod. I knew it. Peter, you're the bread guy. I knew it. He's angry at us because we don't have any bread. Focused on the physical. How do we correct a weird line of thought? Remove your distractions. Identify them and get rid of them. Fix the ratio. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them. So it's an interesting passage, verses 17 through 21. 21 is where we'll end it. He responds to them with 9 questions. 9 questions. These 9 questions are just as important for us. When God is doing something, when God has put something onto our hearts, sometimes it is weird. Sometimes it does not make any sense. Sometimes we just don't understand. Sometimes we forget these 9 questions that Jesus is asking his disciples, because it's a pretty pointed thing. If Jesus is telling us, beware the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod. As soon as someone said, why did he say that? How is the kingdom different? They think that his authority and his miracles, they should be used to shackle people. But instead, what have we seen in the text? Jesus' miracles set people free. We see that practical ministry to the needs of the people. So you're kind of correcting that one, but they're stuck on food. Why are they stuck on food? So Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, so point number 1, Jesus already knows your confusion. He already knows your slip up. He already knows your heartache. He already knows your hurt. So trying to bypass it or to try and sneak it into the prayer, Lord, my lights are kind of starting to dim. Man, they're just raising the cost of the electricity and gas these days. I only make $14 an hour. He already knows what's on your heart. He already knows. He already knows they're reasoning over something physical. Why do you reason? Because you have no bread. Do you not yet perceive nor understand? So there's the first question. If you do not understand, you are not perceiving what it is he's doing, leads us into the next one. Why not? Is your heart still hard? We typically like to put a very fierce and heavy negative connotation on the concept of the hard heart. We say, oh, you have a hard heart. You're going to hell. While sometimes that might be the case, the concept of the hard heart is not absorbing the things that God is doing in your life. Do you have a hard heart? How are you not understanding? You have 1 loaf of bread. If I can feed 4,000 people with 7 loaves, I can feed 12 with 1. How is it that you do not understand? Is your heart still hardened? What are you doing in your life that is stopping you from noticing the things that God is doing in your life? Having eyes, do you not see? What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you paying attention to? What do you spend most of your day focused on? If you're a negative Nancy and you're spending most of your time looking at all the bad stuff, guess what you're going to do? You're going to talk about a lot of bad stuff. What you take in is what you're going to pour out. Having ears, do you not hear? Same concept. And do you not remember? The final one, as far as these first couple of questions as to how they take stuff in. Do you not remember? That's one of the biggest killers. The answer here is no. They forgot that what Jesus can do with the loaves of bread here in the boat. They forgot what Jesus can do with the loaves of bread on the bank on the east side. They have forgotten. We often forget. Why? We do not revisit the Word. We do not revisit our prayer journals. We do not revisit our journals, chronicling, whatever that word is. I am not a thesaurus. That book that we write down the things that God has done in our lives. I have one on my desk, my Jehovah Jireh journal. The Lord provides. Because I forget. Often I deal with easy people. More often I deal with hard people. Lord, what am I going to do about this? Or a hard situation. But when I go back through my book, I go back through his book, comes back to memory. We do not remember because we allow ourselves to forget. Verse 19, when I broke the loaves, the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments did you take up? They said to him, 12. Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. So he said to them, how is it that you do not understand? They do not understand that he is their perfect provision. And it is easy to forget. My friends, we as a church, not just this one, but all of them, persecution is going to come for the church. And we'll discuss that more once we get to the Olivet Discourse here in a few weeks. Things are going to get hard. That's when all the preppers start creeping out. That's when some of us turn into preppers. Not saying it's not a bad thing to be prepared, but we spend way more of our time prepping in the physical and not leaning towards Jesus. So we say, Lord, we're your church. Why would you lead us to that place in the wilderness? Because often we choose to put our trust into something else. We pray for revival. We pray for reformation. But we try and leave out the closeness with Christ. We try to lean on anything else. It should be no surprise that the body of Christ is going to be taken out into the wilderness. We need to, again, learn to rely on him, not ourselves and not of our own. If we can't trust him now, it'd be a foolish thing to think that we'll trust him in the kingdom. Are you really a good king? I need to start hiding things under my tent. Hasn't worked out for anybody else through the word. Led out into the wilderness as a body. Some of us are going to be led out in the wilderness individually. Some of you are led out into the wilderness now. It's not a matter of, Lord, why can't you see me, or why do you just not like me so much? Lord, what am I supposed to learn? This is the best time for you to grow closer to Christ. Let's pray together. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you so much, Lord, for showing us how important your word is for our growth as we move to grow closer to you, to grow in the grace and the knowledge of you. Thank you so much, Lord, for leaving us so many reminders to turn to you, to focus on you, to rely on you. Lord, there's growth that needs to take place in all of our lives. And no doubt, Lord, your Spirit is already doing such a mighty work there. I pray, God, that we would be moved to a place of being willing to yield, that we can grow closer to you. And to remember, Lord, truly how good you are. And we're very thankful for your grace, very thankful for your mercy. And we love you and we praise you and we pray in your name. Amen.